Thank you to John and Eva for that beautiful offertory. What? Oh, someone rang on the doorbell. Okay, someone can check that out. Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the minister here at First UU. Some of you may have needed that reminder because I haven't actually stood in this podium to deliver a sermon since July 10th. Part of the reason for that is just weird summer scheduling and conferences and whatnot, but part of it is because when we set out to do a deep dive on our principles and the glue that holds them and us together, the practice of covenant, there were so many diverse voices that had something to say about all of them that we couldn't not create a platform to share those voices. And I'm so glad that we did. I hope that you, like me, have discovered new understandings and deeper connections with the principles that center us as Unitarian Universalists. Sometimes UUs and other progressive religious folks struggle to name exactly what it is that we're about in an affirmative sense. Sometimes all we can really say is that we aren't that oppressive, excluding church space that so many have been trying to escape and or heal from when they land here. Spending time reviewing our principles helps us to remember that we can tell a compelling story about who we are and why we gather that doesn't have to start with we're not or we don't. We do affirm and promote the UU principles, which the UUA website says we hold as strong values and moral guides. We live out these principles within a living tradition of wisdom and spirituality, drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, scripture, and personal experience. I'm thankful to be participating in this living tradition with all of you, and often find myself translating to other areas of my life the skills and practices shared here of covenant making, of breaking, because we will break our covenants, of reconciling, and of reaffirming the covenant after a restorative process. I believe that the steps we take each day to truly live our principles, as well as the relationships that we are in and the covenants, both implicit and explicit, that hold them together are literally the building blocks of belonging. So I'm thankful that after spending the last 9 weeks recentering ourselves on our principles, we get to spend several Sundays in September thinking about belonging, about what it might mean for an individual to find a place of belonging, and what it means for a community to create and maintain a place of belonging for those already gathered, but also for those who will come along later. Brene Brown, again, has said that true belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. I want to say that again, because there are people within the sound of my voice who have spent a lifetime adapting to their surroundings and becoming who the people around them wanted them to be in order to belong. And not only do you not have to do that, you'll never actually belong that way because nobody knows the fullness of who you really are. So take a deep breath and exhale and hear this. True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. For those of us who have been molding ourselves to fit whatever container we're in, and maybe that's all of us to some extent, these words from Canadian author Tokopa Turner may resonate. She writes, "Our longing for community and purpose is so powerful that it can drive us to join groups, relationships, or systems of belief that to our diminished and divided self give the false impression of belonging. But places of false belonging grant us conditional membership, requiring us to cut out parts of ourselves in order to fit in. While false belonging can be useful and instructive for a time, the soul becomes restless when it reaches a glass ceiling, a restriction that prevents us from advancing. We may shrink back from this limitation for a time, but as we grow in our own truth, the invisible boundary closes in on us and our devotion to the groupthink weakens. Your rebellion is a sign of health. It is the way of nature to shatter and reconstitute. And we all know that people have adapted to being who others want them to be along the way because they have learned, often in hard and painful ways, that many communities haven't been intentionally built to be places of belonging, or don't continue to do the hard work of keeping it so. Wendell Berry has written that a community is the mental and spiritual condition of knowing that the place is shared and that the people who share the place define and limit the possibilities of each other's lives. It is the knowledge that people have of each other, their concern for each other, their trust in each other, the freedom with which they come and go among themselves. If we're honest, we might admit that the idea of our collective possibilities being defined and limited by whoever walks in the door and decides to stick around is a bit unsettling, if not downright offensive. And so our tendency is to build spaces where power is concentrated in small groups of people who see themselves as guardians of the tradition, rather than creating spaces where power is freely given and fully shared and trusting our commitment to the tradition. The process of inclusion and a spirit of education, experimentation, and exploration to actually take us deeper into our expression of the people that we dreamed we could be together. And so we find ourselves in a bit of a paradox. A person can't truly belong in a place until and unless they show up authentically and fully as themselves. And a person can't safely and bravely show up authentically and fully as themselves if the community hasn't created a container that holds diversity and difference in creative tension, balanced with a healthy dose of wonder and curiosity. The good news is that scientists believe that we're made for this kind of connection and positive interaction. Neuroscientists like Matthew Lieberman, the director of UCLA's Social Cognitive Neuroscience Lab, and author of the book Social: Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect, have set out to get clear about who we are as social creatures and to reveal how a more accurate understanding of our social nature can improve our lives and our society. Given the polarization and dysfunction of our society in recent years, I'm all for anything that might improve it. And I'm guessing that some of you are too. So in case you're thinking it's hard to make the kind of changes that make space for others to belong or to even know what kind of changes to make, we don't even know who's going to come in the door. How can we be sure to make a space that's ready and open for their belonging? I want to share some of the evidence that your brain is ready. It might just require some intentionality, some rerouting of neural circuits to create new habits and practices. Information on the studies I'm about to mention can be found in the February 2022 article, How Biology Prepares Us for Love and Connection by Summer Allen. So first of all, our brains are wired for empathy. A study by neuroscientist Tor Wager and his colleagues found that we have a brain circuit dedicated specifically to empathic care, the positive, motivating feelings that drive us to help others in order to relieve their suffering. This circuit includes the nucleus accumbens and the medial orbitofrontal cortex, brain areas involved in other rewarding physical activities that I'll leave to your imaginations. Our brains are wired for cooperation and generosity. A study conducted by anthropologists had groups of women play a game in which one action could win the player $60 and her opponent would get nothing, or a different action would result in both players receiving $40. Mutual cooperation was the most popular outcome, and functional MRI scans showed that when partners had mutually cooperative interactions, brain regions involved in reward processing were activated. Countless studies have demonstrated that our brains are wired for love and relationship. It's been demonstrated also with functional MRI that expressions of love led to decreased activity in brain areas involved in social judgment and negative emotions. Researchers conclude human attachment employs a push-pull mechanism that overcomes social distance by deactivating networks used for critical social assessment and negative emotions, while it bonds individuals through the involvement of the reward circuitry, explaining the power of love to motivate and exhilarate. All of this information and more about the way our brains naturally tend toward building caring and loving relationships supports the social baseline theory by psychologists James Cohen and David Sparra, which suggests that the human brain operates under the assumption that our interactions with others are a vital resource that helps us stay safe and meet our goals. Cohen and Sparra write, at its simplest, SBT suggests that proximity to social resources decreases the cost of climbing both the literal and figurative hills we face, because the brain construes social resources as bioenergetic resources, much like oxygen or glucose. So what if by taking intentional steps toward creating a space of belonging for all people, we are literally giving people the gift of life? They're social and bioenergetic resources that a person needs to live into their best, most authentic selves. And what if we clearly are biologically prepared to enter into relationships in that way? And what if we already have a framework to do just that by wrestling with what each of our principles means in our own daily life and practice, and by being in covenanted relationship that includes not only our aspirations for who and how we would like to be together, but also a realistic and practical plan for what we will do when we fall out of covenant to achieve healing and then return to right relationship with one another. This is the work of creating diverse communities that can hold all of who we are individually in a way that our collective identity becomes more just, more impactful, and more faithful. Carol Flinders, the author of The Values of Belonging, Rediscovering Balance, Mutuality, Intuition, and Wholeness in a Competitive World, draws on indigenous wisdom when she writes, there is a way of being in the world that recoils from aggressiveness, cunning, and greed. This society's core values, which include intimate connection with the land, empathetic relationship with animals, self-restraint, balance, expressiveness, generosity, egalitarianism, playfulness, nonviolent conflict resolution, and openness to spirit are the values of belonging. So we come to this place today in a world where so many people are searching for belonging. where so many people are just fitting in whatever way they can and not bringing the fullness of who they are into the world, which is what we need for all of us to thrive. We need everyone to be able to be their full and authentic selves. And I would say that if any place is poised to become a place where people step into the mix, find a place of belonging, and can continue to grow into the person that the world is sort of calling out of them, that it's this kind of place, with the kinds of principles that we hold to, with the kind of commitment to relationship that we try to practice. And so my hope for us today is that we might celebrate together the progress we've made in building a community that pulls together UU principles and the values of belonging in such a way that people can find a spiritual home here and work to get better and better and better at being the place where everyone brings all of who they are into this space and finds a place of belonging that continues to both support and challenge all of us in our becoming. What is this community if it's not a place that challenges us all to grow in our faith, in our spiritual formation, in our just being good humans in the world, whatever that space is for you, spiritually or religiously, or even the secular space of human development? What is this place but a place where we can come together and develop into our best and brightest human expressions of the world to make this world a better place? May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.